festive gathering. It's really wonderful to see so many people, old friends and new. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tina Pang. I'm president of the Oriental Ceramic Society. I'm really thrilled to see so many, I think, participants also of the conference that's happening at Chinese U later this week on blue and white porcelain here this evening. This evening's lecture is the K.S. Low Memorial Fund Lecture. He was a founding member of the OCS, also a founding member of the Minqiu Society that celebrates its 65th anniversary this year with an exhibition at the Hong Kong Museum of Art. And in a way, this evening's lecture kind of circles around that because Peter Lam delivered a wonderful lecture. Where are you, Peter? Peter Lam delivered a wonderful lecture for us on the history of the Minqiu Society a while back. And it's really thanks to Peter that we were introduced to Dr. Chen Jie, who is Curator and Deputy Director at the Shanghai Museum. And she is also this year's recipient of the Asian Cultural Council Xiaoyang Yu Fellowship. So we're really, really thrilled to have the support both of the ACC and to have her here for the conference later this week. Just incidentally for Alex, I'm also an ACC fellow. I received the Lee Hyson Foundation Fellowship many years ago now. And recently, I'm so happy. I was unfortunately unable to join both last year's inaugural Susan Chun Foundation lecture tour from Dr. Lu Pengliang at the Shanghai Museum of his exhibition that transferred from the Met to the Shanghai Museum on later Chinese bronzes, which is currently on, so I encourage you to go see that, and Chen Jie's wonderful tour of the ceramics galleries at the new Shanghai Museum. So I really encourage you. Everyone came back raving about both Dr. Chen and Dr. Liu and the museum itself. So I'm really thrilled to welcome Dr. Chen. She's going to be speaking this evening on a very under-researched area of early Ming imperial wares, in particular their relationship with the Islamic world and their circulation in India and Indonesia, which I think all of us know very little about. I was with a collector yesterday who said, what else is there to say about blue and white? Hasn't everything been done? But of course, now we're going to find out that no, it hasn't. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Chen for a wonderful lecture, I'm sure, this evening. Thank you.
So thank you, Tina, for such a kind introduction. And tonight, I'm really honored to deliver this K.S. Law lecture. And today, I would like to share my recent findings concerning the early Ming imperial wares across the Indian Ocean. I think as this is not a new topic at all, when we discuss this subject, the collections at the Topkapi in Turkey and the Arbil Shrine in Iran are naturally the first things that came to mind. Let us have a look at these collections, the blue and white pictures, the ones they are from the Topkapi Museum, and the black pictures are from the Arbil Shrine. We can see the whole collection, the wonderful collection of early Ming imperial blue and white wares, imperial wares actually. We have blue and white ones here, top quality ones, and also white porcelain, white imperial wares, and also there's celadon from the Longquan kiln. Here we can see the collection. These wares were previously sought as diplomatic gifts to the Middle East, but without any evidence. Actually, during the research, I found clear evidence for these wares. They are, I think, diplomatic gifts to the Islamic world. Now we can find traces and evidence in the documents. First, we can see that there's a document in the Timurid Empire, and they documented the Chinese emperor sending envoys to Herat and giving gifts to the Timurid emperor. We can see it is recorded in the Timurid historical records. Okay, I think it is recorded in the Timurid records. The great Ming emperor dispatched another mission to Herat. The four principal envoys, among them Li and Chen, I think this is the delegation from the Chen and Li Da, the famous mission sent by the Ming Emperor Yongle to the Herat, to the Timurid Empire. And they traveled with 300 horsemen, and they conveyed numerous imperial gifts to the Timurid Emperor. And among them, there are porcelain vases. We can see the gifts. They have hawks, fine brocade, red silk gauze, and porcelain vases. So we know that porcelain Chinese imperial wares were sent as diplomatic gifts. That is through the land routes, and also in the vertical records of the Ming dynasty in the 17th year of the Yongle period. We see that as the envoys from places like Shiraz and Isfahan departed for home, the emperor assigned a court eunuch Lu'an and Yexian to escort them. And they were presented also with numerous gifts, including many textiles, and among them there's also porcelain wares. So we know these wares were sent as diplomatic gifts through the land routes. And also as the diplomatic gifts were also sent by the sea routes through the Zhenghe's expeditions to the Middle East. We see here this documentation from the Yamani Rasulid dynasty. These documents were kept in the Paris Museum previously, but these documents were never studied or less studied area. I think they provide very important documentation. And actually, the Rasulid dynasty ruled Yemen from 1229 to 1444. The Rasulid era is often considered as one of the most brilliant in the history of Yemen. The Rasulid state nurtured Yemen's commercial ties and links with India and Far East. So they profited greatly by the Red Sea transit trade via Aden and Zabit. So the sultans draw much of their income from taxes and custom revenues from the ports. So we see that in the Rasulid Yamani documentation, this is the history of the Yamani Rasulid documentation, and we find here the two records about the imperial gifts sent by the Ming Emperor to the Yamani Rasulid sultans. The first, that is during the Hijra year of 821, that is the 16th year of the Yongle Emperor. It is the Zhenghe's 5th voyage. So the record reads like that. A junk fleet arrived at Aden port, carrying an envoy from the Chinese king, who presented to my sovereign Sultan Malik splendid gifts. Among the gifts they have a variety of Chinese ceramics. So we know the Chinese ceramics were sent as gifts to the Sultan. And again, then in the Zhenghe's 6th voyage, here we can see that the arrival of Chinese envoy by junk was reported to the Sultan, and this time the Ming Emperor also sent Chinese gifts. Among them, there are many high-quality Chinese ceramics. So we see that it's true that these imperial wares were sent as diplomatic gifts from the Chinese emperor to the Middle East world. And here you can see this is a map of the Rasulid Empire. It is, you can see here in the bottom of the picture, the port of Aden. It is a very important place because it's a very important port located at the throat of the Red Sea, so the Yamani Rasulid Empire. And it is very interesting to see that for those diplomatic gifts, so-called diplomatic gifts, there are many important forms inspired by the Islamic ones, Islamic metalwares. This is quite special. You can see that the ewer copied the Islamic bronze ewer. You can see the candlestick, also it was made after the Islamic prototype. And also here we can see the stand, the flask, the pencil box, and the flask and the jug also copied a Islamic prototype. And there are many large plates and bowls for the Islamic market. And these large plates and bowls were ideally suited to the dining customs of the Islamic regions, where people will sit together, sit on the floor, and share food from the large plates. So these wares, I think, they were made especially for the Islamic market. And another feature is that you can see on all these Islamic-inspired shapes, all the dragons depicted on them are three-clawed ones. Imperial wares imitating this are three-clawed ones. The five-clawed dragon, which is characteristic of the imperial status, is entirely absent. The five-clawed dragons were made, such wares were made especially for the emperor himself. But all these wares, the Islamic shapes, the dragons were all three-clawed. So that indicates that these wares were made for the Islamic world, for the kings and for the people there. It's not for the use of the Ming Emperor himself. And one thing that is, for the big dishes, for all these shapes, this is not the daily use sets in the Ming court. In the Ming court, the Ming Emperor used tablewares, but these tablewares, as they were depicted in the picture, you can see this is a picture depicting the Emperor Shenzong or the Emperor Xianzong for his recreational activities. You can see that on the table there are dishes, but these are all small dishes. And in the documentation, we can see that for the banquet in the Yongle Rhyme, usually for the superior table, the dishes are like this. They have got 5 appetizers to accompany the wine, 5 snacks, 5 tea pastries, 5 roasted dishes, and 3 soup, and double steamed buns and horse meat rice. So these dishes were served on small dishes. They are not served on big dish or plates. So this indicates that the Ming Emperor, so this is the table sets used by the imperial court for the emperor and his family himself. And the big plates are not designed for the emperor himself. And also the documentation in the later Jiaqing period, you can see it is the same. And on the table, you can see the small dishes and the table sets. And we can also find that on the Xuande table sets, all the table sets wares small dishes, medium to small size bowls, the vinegar pourer, the stand cup, and all these wares were depicted with 5-clawed dragons. So this indicated that these are the wares for the emperor himself and for the imperial court. Another evidence is that after the session of Zheng He's voyages, that is in the middle 15th century, probably these wares were made in the middle 15th century, probably during the Tianshun or Chenhua period. So this is after the session of Zheng He's voyages. But At that time, the Ming Imperial weirs primarily produced ceramics in such standard tablewares. They are sets like this. So the large Islamic-inspired forms from the Yongle and Xuande period ceased production from then on. So this also indicated that all these wares were made specially for the Islamic world. So as for the gifts for the other countries, we can also make a comparison. So there's also diplomatic gifts from the East Asia culture sphere. To the Korea, for example, we can see that the Ming Emperor gave gifts to the Joseon dynasty, and the king received a lot of them from the Ming Emperor. But most of them are sets of tablewares. So we can see that in the third year of Xuande, so they got 10 plain white sets of tableware, 5 large blue and white plates, 5 small blue and white dishes. So the next year they got some teacup and white ewer, and then there's 10 plain white sets of tableware. So all of them are tableware. So the such tablewares were identical to that used by the Ming court. And in the Joseon dynasty's documentation, we also can see the image given by the Ming Emperor to them. They preserved an image of the so-called 白瓷青花酒海, that is 3 blue and white jars with dragons amid clouds. So a picture was preserved, and we can see that it is also a 3-clawed dragon depicted on the jar. So this is given by the Ming Emperor. So the 3-clawed dragon highlight the hierarchical difference. The Joseon kings, they are outer vassals, so they are subordinate to the Ming Emperor. So following all these battles, the king of the Joseon also presented a memorial of thanks to the Ming Emperor. So that is on the 3rd year of the Xuande. So he stated that the honor of receiving these vessels is a rarity in past times. White porcelain graces our tables, truly treasures shared from the imperial treasury. Blue and white pattern fills the plates, illuminating our meager state. So this is quite a kind of, statement that is quite a humble statement. And this is, I think, a kind of, pattern for political order construction here in the East Asia culture sphere. The Ming Emperor gave these gifts as a kind of, favor to his vassals. And then the king of Joseon Emperor, when he received these gifts, he always presented such a kind of memorial of thanks. So this is a way that the diplomatic gifts sent by the Ming Emperor to construct a kind of social and political order in the East Asia sphere, in the East Asia. I think this is the same situation in the Middle East from the Ming Emperor's own side, because I think we can see from the documentation, the Ming Emperor, in his documentation in the history of the Ming dynasty, he wrote that as king, when he wrote about Aden, that is the Rasulid dynasty in Aden, he stated that as king, Malik immediately dispatched an envoy to present tributes. So in the Ming Emperor's concept, all these other countries, they are vassals to the Ming Emperor. So they came to the Ming dynasty to present tributes, and these gifts were sent as a kind of to these vessels. In the another documentation, that is Yingya Shenglan. So I think in the later presentation I will cite the documentation again and again, because this is very important, as the writer, the author Ma Huan, served as an interpreter for the Zhenghe for at least 3 times during the 6 expeditions of Zhenghe. So the 4th, the 6th, the 7th voyages. So Yingya Shenglan, or in English, the overall survey of the ocean's shores, is a very important and primary source, providing detailed and first-hand source of the places and people encountered by the Zhenghe's expeditions. So this is very important documentation. So in all this Ming documentation, the Ming Emperor shows that the Ming Emperor hold the same intent and attitude for the Islamic world. But actually, the difference is that in the Islamic documentation by the Islamic historian Ibn al-Daba, this is very important documentation. There he describes the Ming envoy. So at that time, in the documentation, he says that when the envoy was received by Sultan Malik, he did not perform the prostration ritual before him. Instead, he simply stated, "Your sovereign, the Emperor of China, greets you." So this is the message delivered to the Islamic world at that time. But the letter sent later by the Malik to the Ming Emperor contained the following observations. The message conveyed by the envoy, declaring that in this world everything is linked to you, and all the nations of the world belongs to you, is nothing less than stripping Malik of his respect and showing him deliberately discourtesy. So it is evident that the Chinese emperor, the Emperor of China, believes that all men are the emperor's servants. Indeed, they are totally ignorant of the circumstances of various countries and affairs of their kings and princes. So, in the Islamic world, of course, they are not as the situation. It's not as the situation as the East Asia. So this is totally different. The Islamic world, of course, they are not vassals to the Ming Emperor, so they have totally different account with the Ming documentation. So the Ming Emperor, actually, their goal is not necessarily for the formidable submission of the countries. Actually, a similar diplomatic challenge is also with the Timurid Empire. The Ming records are totally different from the Timurid historical records. So these nations, they never established a kind of true tributary relationship with the Ming court. So compare with the East Asia sphere, the so-called political construction is not successful at all. So what's the reason for presenting such luxurious gifts to the Middle East world? So what's the point for that? We have the question. And we also need to notice that during the Yongle and Xuande Imperial, during the Yongle and Xuande rhymes, the extent volume of imperial porcelain is substantial. Among all these surviving pieces, there's a disproportionately high representation of vessel types linked to the Islamic, particularly large dishes and bowls. So there are many large dishes. Actually, I think it is the most common form we have ever seen in the Yongle and Xuande period. So since these large dishes and bowls are not standard wares for the routine use within the Ming Imperial court, so their disproportionate survival merits scholarly attention and explanation here. So our research question is like this: why did the Islamic style porcelain from the early Ming realms survive in such vast numbers? And what motivated the Ming court to place such great importance on the Islamic regions? What specific diplomatic, political, and economic roles did the artifacts play during the early Ming period? So this is our questions for that. So to answer these questions, first I did a global survey for the early Ming imperials around the world. So the key finding is that most important survival wares were kept in the Middle East world, but there are also striking quantities in Indonesia and India. So this is a fact that is largely overlooked in the previous studies. So in contrast, we can see that the discovery of Ming imperial wares in other regions, like those in East Asia and other parts in the Southeast Asia, remain comparatively scarce, so the numbers are quite little. So why is that? We need to explore the reason for that, since it's not for the political reason. So we can see that first in Indonesia, the Ming imperial wares found there, actually now we can see in the Princess of Museum in Holland, they have this kind of what we call tianqiuping, this vase. It is from Indonesia, although the place is not noted, but we know that the place is from purchased in Indonesia. And in the National Museum of Holland, there's also a big dish, first quality Yongle and Xuande ware depicted with fine grades. So these are also from Indonesia, the place. And here we can also see these wares, we can find their specific sites. These wares were found actually in Sumatra. So this was this ball with foliated ring, also depicted with grapes. It was found in Jambi, Sumatra. It is now kept in the National Museum of Indonesia. And another blue and another celadon dish incised with the flowers. It is also found in Siak, Sumatra, in the National Museum of Indonesia. So the place Sumatra is particularly interesting because, as we know that Sumatra was the first region in Indonesia to feature a Muslim political state. So scholars frequently cite the founding of Pasai Sultanate in the 13th century as the official beginning of Islam's presence in Indonesia. And by the early 15th century, the area functioned both as the staging point for the Indian Ocean voyages as a major Muslim hub. So this is the place. And also we can see it is the same. It is also recorded in the Chinese documentation in Ya Shenglan, written by Ma Huan. So Ma Huan stated that the kingdom of Sumatra is the main thoroughfare of the Indian Ocean, 乃西洋之总头路, and it is characterized by many foreign ships coming and going, and people there believe in Islamic faith. So Ma Huan noted that this is a kind of Islamic hub at that time. And also, there's one more important thing. It is that Zhenghe established Guanchang here. Guanchang is a kind of warehouse or operating base for Zhenghe's voyages. So here, Zhenghe we can see in the documentation, Zhenghe established a guanchang here. So in the Xiaoyang Fanguozhi, this is another book written by another person who participated in Zhenghe's expedition. He recorded that these guanchang were the operating base or outer capital for the expedition. So the entire fleet would first gather here before splitting into small groups to conduct trade in various foreign countries. And after completing their tasks in places like Hormuz, they started to return. So this is a very important place also for the Zhenghe's voyages. We can see. And let's go on to see other pieces. There's also early Ming wares found in Indonesia in another place, the Maluku Islands. Here we can see a ewer, first quality Ming Yongle blue and white ewer. And then it is found in Halmahera on the island of Makuru. And there's another ewer in the Islamic shape, imitating the Islamic bronze ware. It is also found in Halmahera. And then we can see a flask in the Islamic shape. It is found in Ternate in the Makuru Island. So the place, Maluku Islands, is also a very important place. The Makuru Islands are renowned as the Spice Islands, because they have got abundant cultivation of nutmeg and cloves. So these spices are crucial commodities in the transoceanic trade and exchange network of the Indian Ocean, so supplying the markets in Asia, the Middle East, and the West. Later, when the Portuguese came, when the Dutch came, they also recorded that the Maluku Islands are very important places for all these spices. And we know that during the 14th and early 15th centuries, the critical segment of the spice route, so that is the maritime pass, running from Indonesia through the Strait of Malacca and then across the southwestern India and onwards to the Persian Gulf and Red Sea, was under the control of all those Muslim merchants. So the Maluku Islands served as a definitive geographical origin of this trade route. So it is also very important Islamic trade place. This is the origin of that, the Spice Islands. And next, we can see this wares found in Indonesia from another place. So this is found in Trowulan. These shards were kept now in the National University of Singapore. So here we can see the shards. We can see the flask, the neck of the flask, the body of it. So the shards are from different pieces. We can see probably flask, the tianqiu vase, and also the big plates. The plates depicted with lotus flowers, the plates depicted with grapes. So they are big plates and Islamic shapes now found in Trowulan, the place. So Trowulan is another important and interesting place. We know that Trowulan is famous for its findings of the yuan blue and white. So the two most important findings of yuan blue and white, one is in Trowulan and the other in Southeast Asia. One is in Trowulan and the other is in India, in the North India. So the two most important places, and today they will be coincident. So the East Java, this is the place, Trowulan, is also a very important one because Trowulan served as the capital of the Majapahit Empire. So this empire was the dominant political power based in East Java in Southeast Asia throughout the 14th century. And it remained a major trade hub in early 15th century. And later, the spread of Islam and the rise of Islamic states along the northern coast of Java eventually brought the Majapahit area to an end in the late 15th century. So here we can see this is a map of the East Java, and we can see here, this is the place of Majapahit in Trowulan, and here this is the Majapahit Empire. So this place, it is also recorded by Ma Huan in his Yin Ya Shenlan. Here, this is he recorded that various foreign ships come here and trade. And first, there are many people living here. Ma Huan recorded the first class is Muslim people, who are all merchants settled here from the West. So again, this is a place related with the Islamic world. And Ma Huan also recorded that those who settled here from Guangdong, Zhangzhou, and Quanzhou lived luxuriously and had largely adopted the Islamic faith. So we can see the place here. And also, this is very important, he recorded that people of this land greatly enjoy Chinese blue and white porcelain. So it is the same that we know in the Yuan dynasty, there are many Yuan blue and white found here in the same place, the Trowulan. So again, this is the same situation here. We can see people appreciate Chinese blue and white wares here, and there are many Muslim people, Muslim merchants settled down here. So these are the situation in the Indonesia. And we can go on to see the early Ming Imperial wares found in India. So in India, first we can see the Cunning's collection. So the Cunning's collection that is in the later half of the 19th century. William Cunnings worked as an engineer in India, so where he collected a large number of Chinese ceramics there. Many of his best quality holdings were from the kingdom of Oudh in the North India. So the Oudh state was a Mughal suburb and then became an independent kingdom. So the Oudh state's collection largely inherited from the Mughal Empire. And the Mughal Empire was founded by Babur. He was a descendant of Timur, and he established the dynasty by invading India, overthrowing the Delhi Sultanate, and later conquered the Bengal Sultanate. So the Mughal Empire in India has a large collection of blue and white porcelain here. Then, by tracing the inscriptions on the early Ming blue and white wares and white wares, all these imperial wares, we can find a large number of wares can be traced back to the Mughal Empire. So that means that these wares belong to India. So they were from India by tracing these inscriptions. We can first see the white plate. Definitely it is an early Ming white imperial white plate. So it is inscribed with the inscription of Shah Jahan. Shah Jahan is a famous emperor of the Mughal Empire. He was famous for the building of Taj Mahal in India, Taijili. So we can see his inscription on the white plate. And then the next one that is from the Altai collection in France now, on this foliage ruined blue and white big plate. It is depicted with grapes, first quality one, So this is also inscribed with the inscription of Shah Jahan. Here, at the bottom of this plate, we can see his inscription. So we know that it is from the Mughal Empire. And then in the Asian Art Museum of San Francisco, there's another plate. It is also inscribed with the inscription of the Mughal Empire, Shah Jahan, with his inscription. And next, we can see the Wellington collection in the UK. The plate, Yongluan Xuande ware, of course, it is also inscribed with this kind of Shah Jahan inscription. And the inscription reads that this plate belonged to Shah Jahan, warrior of the faith. And there's also a tag for this plate. It is read that Lucknow 1859. So this is the capital city of the Indian Kingdom. So it has a very similar province or region with the Carnings collection. So they indicate that they are all from the Mughal Empire collection. And then in Sotheby's, we can see another piece. So this is a Longquan Celadon imperial ware, of course. You can see from the quality of the base and also the carved patterns. So definitely this is imperial ware of the Longquan at that time. It is also inscribed with the Shah Jahan inscription, indicating that this is a piece of the Mughal Empire. And here we can find another ewer. It is a formal collection of the Sir Murray it's a Sir Murray. So he was a military auditor of the general for the East India Company in Bengal. He acquired this ewer in Bengal. And next we can see another one. So this is with another emperor's inscription, Jahangir. Jahangir inscription in the Christie's, we can see this is a Longquan ware, and it is written with the Jahangir inscription. It reads that Jahangir, the successor to Akbar. So this is another Mughal Empire collection. And in the British Museum, we can find a Aurangzeb inscription in the bottom of this flask, again for the Mughal Empire. And there's Aurangzeb inscription on another piece. This is in the collection of the Islamic Museum of Art in Doha. This is a Longquan Celadon imperial ware. It is also inscribed with the Aurangzeb inscription. So we know that all these wares, they were formerly the collection of the Mughal Empire. So the origin were from India. They were kept in India previously. And also the Japanese scholar Karashima, she also noted that he had observed several pieces of Xuande marked imperial blue and white ware once collected by the Mughal Empire at the Delhi Museum in India. So this is published, but I cannot find a picture for that. But he noticed that all these pieces are from India. And we can also get some evidence from the miniatures of the Mughal Empire. We can see this is from the Victoria and Albert Museum. It is the Akbar receives the Iranian ambassador. So we can see on the carpet, on the floor, there are many, many dishes, and they were served on all those big plates in the Islamic style. And in the picture, we can see there's definitely blue and white ware over there. It is here, you can see the blue and white one, and this is Celadon one. I think it's Longquan Celadon. So it shows that in the Mughal Empire, they use Celadon and blue and white wares. So in another miniature in the Metropolitan Museum, we can see there's also a depiction of blue and white ware here. So the Mughal Empire, they have a custom of using and collect Chinese blue and white wares, especially those first quality early Ming Imperial wares. So we know that they have a very large collection. So the extent and quality of Chinese collection in India actually surpass of our previous knowledge. And I need to note that the timeline for the accumulation of these artifacts is notably consistent with the two great collections household now in Ardabil and Topkapi. The accumulation of all these wares are basically from the same time period. So like their counterparts, the Mughal Muslim rulers demonstrated a strong preference for Chinese porcelain too. And I need to say that the Mughal Empire is founded by Babur. He established the dynasty by invading India, and later he conquered Delhi Sultanate and Bengal Sultanate. But if we take into consideration Babur's initial history of instability during the empire's formation, so it is highly improbable that the collection of the fragile porcelain were largely inherited from the Timurid court. So the majority of the Mughal collection should have been collected locally from India, within India. So these wares were collected within India, all these wares. It is true that in the records we can say the Ming Imperial porcelain from the court to the India and Bengal in the documentation. In the veritable records of the Ming dynasty, we can find that several documentation for sending gifts from the Ming court to the India and Bengal. In the 7th year of Yongle, the Yongle emperor sent to the king of Calicut. In the Chinese documentation, it is called Guli, but actually it's Calicut. So we can see the red spot in India here. It is where Calicut was located. He gave the king of Calicut a lot of gifts. Among them, there are Chinese porcelain here, documented here. And then in the 7th year of the Yongle emperor, we can see that the king of Bengal came to China, and this time the minister of rice bestowed upon the king gifts, including patent silks, gold embroidered parasols, and porcelain and other gifts. So they were presented as gifts to the kings in India and Bengal Sultanate. And again, in the 10th year of the Yongle, again, we can see in the documentation, in the Chinese records, these wares, the porcelain wares, were sent as gifts to the king of Bengal. So, the two places, Calicut and Bengal, are very important places in India to receive the diplomatic gifts from the Ming court, the two places. First, let's see the Calicut. Calicut in India has held a strategic position since the Song and Yuan dynasties. So it is at the crucial, critical crossroads of the Great Sea, the Indian Ocean. And it is functioned as a vital trade transit hub in the Indian Ocean, in the Indian subordinate, facilitating the maritime trade traffic bound for Persian Gulf and the Arabic Peninsula. So we can see that Zheng He's fleet first anchored here in the winter of 1405 during his first voyage to the Indian Ocean. And then this place, Calicut, became a regular port for call for all of his later expeditions. So although Calicut itself is not a Muslim kingdom, it is a Hindu Zamorin kingdom, but the important thing is that Yingya Shenglan also noted that the entity in charge of the state affairs and dealing with the Ming court was a Muslim merchant body here. So we can see the records here. The king has powerful chief men to manage state affairs, and they are entirely Muslims. Treasure ships arrive. All commercial transactions are managed primarily by the two headmen. And then the wealthy merchants will bring commodities like rubies, pearls, and coral for viewing and price negotiation. So the states were managed, and all the merchants were, and all the dealings with the Ming court was managed by the Muslim merchant body. So this is quite important. And also, Zheng He's fleet also established another official depot, what we call Guanchang here. Although it is not recorded in the Chinese documents, later, several decades later, the Portuguese who arrived here left the records in their historical sources. So to write in their documentation, the Chinese have navigated through these paths for a long time. The Chinese had here in Calicut for a long time a trading post, and it is still there, which they call China Quarter, meaning Chinese fort here. So we can see that the Calicut, it is still a Muslim merchant hub. And again, Zheng He set up a Guanchang official depot here. The Bengal Sultanate is also another place we see received a lot of gifts, porcelain from the Ming court. And again, the situation is the same. We can see in the Yingya Shenglan, Ma Huan recorded that the entire populace of the kingdom is Muslim, and people there are generally pure and kind. Many wealthy families construct ships and sail to foreign countries to engage in commerce. So the king also sent people to foreign countries to trade, acquire local products, pearls, and precise stones to be presented as tribute to China. So the situation is the same. There are Muslims there. And again, we can find the Zheng He, the team, the mission, they set up a Guanchang here, although it is not documented in formal Chinese records, but we can see the documentation here. It is a kind of scholarly collective in the late Ming period. Bao Ritang Chuji records Zhang Xuan died on a mission to Bengal in the 10th year of Yongle. He recorded that the Bengal kingdom is located in western India. At its sea mouth, there is a port called Chadi, also known as Chake Bay, where our official ships anchor. And here the Lord Liu Tang died of illness in the official depot. The Chinese is 卒于其地官场. So he died in the Guanchang. So we know that Zheng He also set up a Guanchang here in Bengal. So let's have a look at all these key overseas excavation and preservation sites. Over all these overseas, we can see that early Ming Imperial wares were all kept and excavated from the Middle East places. Topkapi, Arbil, and here Fustat, Hormuz, Juffa, all Islamic places, the consumption sites and port ruins. And other than that, they were all found in South and Southeast Asia, in India and Indonesia. so only in these places. So this is very interesting because these key sites of early Ming Imperial wares, they share very common characteristics and research, and they share very common characteristics. They are all Muslim commercial network hubs and principal consumption centers like Java, Sumatra, Calicut, Aden, Hormuz, Fustat. All of them are Muslim hubs. And these places, many of them, Zheng He also set up his guanchang there, like Calicut, Bengal, Sumatra, Hormuz. These are places where Zheng He set up his guanchang. And we can see that there's overwhelming preservation of Yongle to Xuande imperial wares in the Islamic trade hubs and consumption sites here. So by contrast, the places in other regions, we can find very little of them, the Yongle and Xuande imperial wares. So it is very interesting because the archaeological finds in states with close diplomatic ties with the Ming Emperor, like the Thailand, Champa, Korea, Rukuru, all these places, they have very close relationship and diplomatic exchanges with the Ming court and emperor. But these places, they have, very little collection of early Ming imperial wares. All these wares were kept in the Islamic-related sites. So the findings, I think, they do not correlate with the intensity of their official exchanges with the Ming court. So we can see the difference. Why is the reason for that? So I think if we place together the Chinese and Islamic text, this is a kind of a jigsaw puzzle for Chinese and Islamic texts. If we piece them together, I think we can find the reason here. So basically, I'm very lucky to find the documentation here. This is the 7th expedition of Zheng He's voyage. We can see in the 7th expedition, Zheng He, the mission, his traces was recorded by different authors, different documentations. First, by the Chinese documentation, Yinya Shenglan. And then it was the mission, the ships were observed in the Yamani Rasulid dynasty by the documentation in the Yamani Rasulid dynasty. And then the Mamelukes in Egypt, they noted, his last expedition. So the trade routes, we can see, we will piece them together and explain later. But first, I show them in Chinese, and I will explain that. The mission was recorded like this. First, the mission arrived here in India, Calicut. And then the Rasulid documentation recorded that the mission went to Yamani. And then they went to the port of Mecca and Jeddah. And later they were saw that the mission went to Jeddah and sold out their goods in Mecca. So this is their route. We'll explain his. So we can see first in Yinya Shenglan, there's a record of Tianfang of Zheng He's voyage. It is recorded in the 5th year of Xuande, Zheng He was commissioned. Okay. So let's play the jigsaw puzzle again. In Yinya Shenglan, so it is recorded that commissioned imperial decree to travel aboard. And then, when the fleet reached the kingdom of Calicut, a detachment led by Hongbao saw the Calicut was sending a mission to the kingdom of Mecca. So we can see that when Zheng He's mission arrived in Calicut, so they see the Calicut was sending a mission to Mecca. And then the mission selected 7 men, including interpreters carrying masks, porcelain, and other items to travel there aboard Calicut ships. So this is quite important. We find here that Calicut was sending a mission to the Mecca. And then the Ming mission, they are aboard Calicut's train. So they are using the Islamic merchants, they are using their network and their ships to go to Mecca. So, and we see that they bring back diverse rare goods and exotic treasures, including kiln, limes, and other things. We know that the mission, they went to Mecca, and then they bring porcelain and gifts to Mecca, and then they bring back rare goods and exotic treasures. So they lay great attention. So they lay great stress on all those exotic goods brought back from Mecca. So this is very important for them. And one thing that is also important, I need to point out, they are aboard the Calicut train. It is not their own train. And then from the Yamani manuscript of the Rasulid dynasty, they say that the captain of the junk arrived and carrying gifts for the Adamalik, for the Rasulid king. So this is a routine. We know that this is the 7th expedition of Zheng He's voyage. And then in the last time, in the 5th and 6th expedition, Zheng He's team mission also visited Yamani and presented gifts to the Malik, to the Rasulid Sultan. So he went to Yemen first. They went to Yemen first. So I need to point out that the Calicut is very important because in Yingya Shenglan, in Ma Huan's documentation, the king has powerful chief headmen to manage state affairs. They are entirely Muslims. We noted that. So he noted that these state affairs were managed by the Muslim merchants, by the Muslim person. So a very important fact is that due to the intrinsic interconnectedness of the Persian Gulf and Indian Ocean trade network, families that monopolized maritime trade in Persian Gulf often concurrently served as representatives for Muslim merchant communities in Southeast India. So we have an example, a little earlier example, but it's very important. In the late 13th century, the powerful Tibi family, he ruled Kish Island. So the family supplemented the Abu Ali family in the Persian Gulf trade. But following this, a person from the Tibi family was appointed as the Governor General and Finance Minister of the Pendar Kingdom of Mabar. So this Mabar, the kingdom, this is located in southeast India. This is a kind of, Tamil kingdom. It is not a Muslim kingdom. But we see that in the 14th century, the country, the minister, governor of general and finance minister is a Muslim. And the Muslim merchant came from a famous family of the TB family, and this is a family that monopolized and ruled the Persian Gulf trade. So these we can see from another documentation from the Rashiduddin Shiji. He records the TB family's absolute authority in the Indian nation, in the Pandya realm. So he recorded that every item of merchandise arriving in Malabar, this is a very important place in South India. Every item of merchant place arriving in Malabar from the regions of Qing, from the regions of China and Hindustan, could not be transacted with the intended buyers unless it passed through his agents. So he is in control of all the trade in India. And in Kish, the TB family, not a single transaction could be concluded unless the goods were first selected and acquired by the agent of the TB family. So we see that the family controlled the Persian Gulf trade, also sent their representatives to Southeast India, to the South India. And the representative, also served as very high-ranking officials in Southeast Asia and controlled the trade with China and also with the Islamic world. This is in the Yuan dynasty, but it is also the same in the early 15th century, because we see that in Yin Shenglan, Ma Huan recorded that the powerful chief headsmen to manage the state affairs, they are entirely Muslims. So we know this is the same situation. So the trade network is important because the Muslims, the Muslim merchants, control the Persian Gulf trade, also control the trade from India to the Persian Gulf. In the records, we see that the Chinese mission, they use the trade network of the Calicut. So this is not their own network. They are using the Islamic trading network. And later, in another records in the Egypt, we can see what's recorded. The mission, news from the glorious Mecca, the several Chinese ships sailing from China toward the Indian coast had 2 ships anchored in Aden. It is also recorded in the Rasulid documentation. But due to the social unrest in Yemen, they were unable to sail all the cargo on board, including porcelain, silk, and musk. So at that time, there's a kind of, social unrest in Yemen. So the Chinese mission, they cannot sell all the cargo. They are selling the cargo, including porcelain, silk, and musk. So the general captain then wrote to the 2 Mamluk officials, that is the Emir of Mecca and the Mayor of Jeddah. Jeddah is the port to the Mecca. So the captain really knows whom to contact when they face a kind of difficult situation. So this is very accurate person they found to contact, the Emir of Mecca and then the Mayor of Jeddah. So they requested permission to Jeddah. These officials wrote to the Sultan, persuading him by stressing the great profits to be gained. So Sultan allowed them to come to Jeddah and asked them to receive the Chinese with great hospitality. And later, in the another Mamluk documentation, we see that the Chinese ships carrying countless luxury goods arrived at Mecca and sold those goods there. So we know that those goods were sold to the Mecca. So the porcelain carried by the mission, the porcelain, the mask, the silk, they're not only diplomatic gifts to the sultan, to the headman, but they are also commodities. Because the Mamluks, they see the Chinese sold all these luxury goods in Mecca. So they are also, we now know that these imperial wares, they are also commodities. And we need also to note the captain contacted the two important persons here. But I think the captain must be a Islamic captain, because it is said that the Chinese were on board on a Calicut ship. And second, if we remember, when the Chinese met the Rasulid Sultan, they know very little about the world, the Islamic world. They do not know the customs there. They do not know. They're totally ignorant of the situation in the Islamic world. But here, when they faced a kind of social unrest in Yemen, at the first time they found the solution and contact the right person. So this must be the Islamic merchants. They have the help from Calicut, not by themselves. So we know that also, if we go back to the previous voyage of Zheng He, we see that in the 9th year of Yongle, Zheng He also sent another mission. So this time, this mission sailed from Sumatra to Aden. So this time, we found a place, Sumatra. We know that Sumatra is a very important place for imperial wares and also a Muslim hub. So this time, in the 7th expedition, the ships sailed from Calicut, but this is the 6th expedition. So this time, the ships sailed from Sumatra, the exact place where many early Ming imperial wares were found. So then the king, we know that upon their arrival, so this ship sailed from Sumatra to Aden. And when they arrived in Aden, the Sultan of the Aden immediately permitted his people to sail and trade any precious treasures to them. From this trade, the mission acquired a lot of important and treasure goods there. So we see that this time first is from Sumatra, and second, if you want to trade and sell goods, you need the permission of the ruler, from the king, from the sultan. So we know that it is very important to get the permission from different documentation. In Calicut, in the Yuan dynasty, we see without the permission of the TB family, you cannot sell anything. Here you can see without the king's permission, you cannot sell anything or buy anything. So to purchase all these precious goods, you need a permission and help from the king. So, and we can also see that the mission, they laid great importance on the goods acquired, all those luxurious goods, cat's eye, gems, and all those, qilin and rose water and things like that. So this is quite valued by the mission. Then we find that in the previous expedition, the 5th one, This time, the Yamani Rasulid company, we've listed this documentation before, but I need to tell about that. This is when they bring the Ming Emperor came and fine gold brocade garments, high-grade mask, and a variety of Chinese ceramics were presented as gifts to the Yamani Rasulid Sultan. But the Sultan also commenced a selection of return gifts to be prepared for the Chinese king. So this included various luxurious items, coral trees processed at the port, and wild animals such as ox and asses, as well as leopards and other, tamed leopards and lions. So the Sultan prepared a lot of gifts in return to the gifts he received from the Ming Emperor. So we now can conclude, for the early Ming Imperial porcelain, some of them were sent as diplomatic gifts. They are diplomatic gifts to the Sultan, but these gifts were also sent as exchanges with Muslim rulers, actually for the luxurious goods in the Middle East. So this is a kind of trade maintained under the facade of gift exchange. You gave them luxurious goods and you got the luxurious goods in return. And these were very in demand by the emperor. And also for the diplomatic gifts, it is also for the channel, for the permission and protection for the trade. So to do trade there, you need permission from the Sultan, from the Muslim rulers. So that is why they prepared a lot of gifts for the Islamic world. So just as they were during the era of Marco Polo, Muslim merchants remained the dominant commercial force in the transit trade of the Southeast China Sea and the Indian Ocean throughout the era of Zheng He. So the major Ming overseas bases and sites of Guanchang along the Indian Ocean routes, including Sumatra, Java, Bengal, and Calicut, were simultaneously the most critical hubs of the Muslim commercial network. So because these merchants control the majority of the spice and luxury goods trade, so these ports naturally became the primary points for the period's rare and exotic commodities. So the Muslim world, the Muslim merchants, they have the most important and wealth of the luxurious goods demanded by the Chinese. In the Chinese documentation, we can see the missions sent to the other world, to the other countries. When they back, they always got many luxurious goods. So these goods were commodities produced there but lacking in the Chinese land. These wares can be kept in the imperial gardens and stored as treasures in the imperial treasuries and utilized for the decorative objectives and imperial apparel. So this is for the emperor himself. In the later period, when the Zheng He's expedition ceased, in the Tianshun Rime, you can see the missions have suspended for over 30 years. So this left the imperial treasury depleted. So when the Zheng He expedition ceased, the treasury, the Ming court, they can no longer get all these precious stones, all these treasures from the Islamic world. And let's see the treasures got from Zheng He's voyagers. This is excavated from the tomb of the Prince Zhuang of Liang Zhuang Wang. in his tomb, we can see many gold ornaments. We can see the bells. There are many, sapphire, ruby, and precious gems. All these precious gems were got and purchased from the Indian Ocean trade, from the Islamic world. And in the gold, it is inscribed that in the 17th year of Yongle, the mission purchased this gold. So this gold also purchased through the Zheng He's expedition. So we don't know. As for the other commodities, we can see the qilin always on the list of the treasures got from Zheng He's expedition. Qilin is regarded as a very important, as very important for the Ming court. We can see Shen Du, he wrote the ode to the auspicious qilin in a poem. So we can see a qilin emerged in this poem. A qilin emerged from the kingdom of Bengal and was rendered as tribute to the imperial court. And then this singular event is wholly attributed to Your Majesty, that means the Emperor of Yongle, sharing your virtue with heaven. So this is ode also to Yongle Emperor. So in the Ming people's view, this serves as a fictitious omen of the eternal great peace for the nation. So this is treated as an auspicious omen for the whole country. So this is the meaning of the qilin. So in conclusion, we know that the Ming Emperor, when he got all these treasures, he not only used it by himself, he also sent all these treasures as gifts to his vassals and princes. We know that the belt, the gold, they were excavated from the tomb of Liang Zhuangwang. So he sent the treasures as a gift to his ministers and princes. So this is also important for the emperor. We know that this is a way to buy the support from his ministers. So in conclusion, we know that the early Ming Imperial porcelain served not only as a kind of diplomatic gifts during the expeditions to the Indian Ocean, but also as a critical official commodity exchanged for the luxurious goods. So the Islamic regions and commercial networks that possessed the greatest wealth in rare treasures and exotic goods were thus given special attention. So this is the reason why they've got so many Ming imperial treasures, imperial porcelain wares. So the economic motivation behind that is the rare treasures and exotic goods acquired through such exchanges were used to first to satisfy the emperor's luxurious lifestyle and replenish the private treasury of the emperor. But there's also political motivation. For the foreign treasures acquired through the exchanges were also used to win over and bestow favor upon domestic princes and officials, so demonstrating the emperor's favor and securing support from external governance. So these items also served to display the nation's great power and submission of countless states, thus projecting the emperor's authority and majesty. So this is a legitimacy problem because the Yongle emperor, having usurped the throne, was keen to acquire support and reinforce his legitimacy. In this context, the early Ming imperial porcelain exchanges directly addressed the emperor's pressing political and economic needs. So. Thank you for your attention. So I know it is a little bit difficult because there are many, Chinese names and Arabic names, Islamic names. But basically, so this is the idea, and I know it is a little bit difficult for me to express in English. So actually,
thank you, Dr. Chen, for an amazing lecture. A really fantastic conclusion on how kind of economic motivations can be force for peace, actually. It's very peaceful trade. So I think we have a few moments for questions. I'm sure there are many questions perhaps percolating